Thank you for joining us again. We're here for part 2 of our weekly podcast. If you haven't yet watched part 1, then you can find the link for that in the video description or on our YouTube page. But anyway, let's just jump right in. Specifically in your faith, what do you think are some of the things that God's been speaking to you specifically about?
I think to begin with, I found it really hard to connect with my faith during the lockdown because work was really just where obviously everything was ever changing, like daily, hourly, with device and stuff. Were so manic, I just didn't have I couldn't make the space, and I just didn't, and it was really difficult. Actually, I found it really hard to connect and make that time to connect with God and actually lay all that on Him, and actually, just and not try and shoulder it myself. I think I just went into that, something which is typical for me, which is just to kind of hunker down and work a bit harder, and that's sort of the opposite, really. And what's been nice actually about being on the tech team, and the being able to sit and listen to the sermons, without the kind of interruption and stuff, is actually I've been reminded of the importance of grace and how amazing that grace is. It kind of meets us where we need it, not what we deserve, but much more than we deserve. And that you can, despite all the bad stuff you've done, that actually that grace is what you can live in now. And it's not something you have to strive to achieve. It's something that you're given freely, despite what you're doing. And I know that at times, as I'm sure lots of other people have had frustrations, I'm not always the most patient person, and Katie will definitely say that during the lockdown periods, I've not always been the most patient person to live with, and that's not, that's something that I had to ask forgiveness for, and ask for grace and ask for more grace for, really. So that's been a challenge, but that's been the good thing about getting connected with the tech team, and finding out that FCC are on Spotify. People get on Spotify, listen to the sermons back. If you can't listen to them on the day, they're all there. So that's been really nice. That's been good.
Yeah, they're great.
I think from my point of view, mine's probably been a little bit different, because where I was on maternity leave and then I had to go back to work, I was almost in my own little bubble anyway, in terms of I had a baby, then I knew I was going to go back to work in the August time, and I guess my anxieties around going back to work were heightened because of the lockdown, and I was just worried about her going into nursery and potentially catching it. I work for the NHS. I'm a children's community physio, so I was going into kind of a more high contact job than I was doing already in that year. So our risk of getting infection was very low, but then me going into that job was increasing that risk. And I think I really had to trust and rely on God. And it sounds very twee, and I know as Christians we say that quite a lot, but I really, really had to dig deep and really put it into His hands. And I think that's the only way I actually got back to work, because I am an anxious person, but that anxiety kind of hit a new high, I think. For me going back, I really struggled and grappled with it, with not really wanting to, but when I got back to work, it was absolutely fine. It was like a switch went on, and I felt really calm about it, and I felt really calm about all the personal protective equipment that I had to use, and it just flowed, I think. think that's the best way to describe it. And Anya's settled into nursery really well. She's been poorly from coughs and colds, but the general things that you would pick up as you're a child. So I didn't have to worry about that. And as a family, we've actually been, thankfully, really well. And that's a massive answer to prayer. And I do think that he has had his hand on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's so good to hear. I mean, the two things that you guys have shared, your two reflections and things you feel like God's been teaching you most about. I mean, Dan, for you saying that it comes across this word simple comes to mind. I think just actually that sometimes you're saying that we can come to what a relationship with God looks like as a burden, as a chore. And it's so easy to forget the whole grace message in that. And actually that this whole time I've certainly learned in the same way you have that actually a relationship with God is far more simple than I've made it. It is far more achievable than I've made it before, and partly that's not been just me making it. It's partly the way we operate as church and the way we express our faith in church. But just being reminded of that message of grace, that actually God just loves us so much. And actually he doesn't ask us to feel guilt or shame or anything like that. And in fact, those things can sometimes hamper our ability to be able to connect with him even more. And yeah, patience is definitely not my thing either. I can definitely say I am probably the least patient person ever. And so what have been some of the things that you've been trying to do, if any at all, to try and work on that patience?
It's a very good question. That is a 31-year question.
I mean, if we don't have time for it, it's fine.
No, I'm impatient. I want to give you the answer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm impatient. I want the answer.
Yeah. I think I've just tried to. To be honest, it's a really difficult question. If I'm honest with you, put me right on the spot there.
No, maybe reword it then. What are some of the things that you think we could do to? Because I think I don't want to stereotype here, but I think impatience is definitely a male trait. I talked to a lot of guys, and impatience is like a running theme, and so I think it's good to sometimes reflect and think, okay, what are some of the things I could do to work on that? I might be wanting to listen to some advice more than anything else.
I suppose a lot of the time when sort of that impatience usually comes from, for me, a place where I'm feeling more low. So prior to doing, probably what is this going to be? Going back 4 or 5 years now, I used to be a teacher and came out of that because I ended up falling into a real bad spiral of anxiety and depression, and was signed off, and it was a whole kind of thing. And I didn't work for about late October till, I don't know, March or something. But this was like sort of going into 2017, and I think I've noticed in myself more when I'm lower, I'm less patient, and I think I'm lower, and noticeably so, when I'm being hard on myself for something. And the thing that I think I've noticed with reminding myself and being reminded of that simple grace message is that it's not a message of being hard on yourself.
Yeah.
It's a message of being real with yourself, but in terms of your old life was not the right way, and it's not helping you. But it's not one that says your old life was really bad, and remember all those things you did. Oh, remember that time you did that? That's awful. I can't believe you did that. It's your old life was bad, but you don't live in that way anymore. Because of Jesus, you can live in this way.
Yeah.
And I think being reminded of that helps me to not probably get to that level of low. And the grace that is antidepressant medication does help also. But I think that, when I've not, during the lockdown periods, when I've not had that more at the forefront of my mind, the antidepressant medication only does so much, I think, for me. So I think that is the thing that's probably would be the advice, is that actually for me, if you're being hard on yourself and you internalizing all that stuff, you never get impatient because you haven't got the headspace to be patient with someone else when you're tired and they're tired, and you say something that is a bit narky, but you take it even narkier than it really is because you're feeling like it, and you've got your fists up ready to have a fight.
Yeah.
It's just that grace message is you're good enough because Jesus made you good enough.
Yeah, 100%.
So don't beat up on yourself about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I should put you on the spot more often. I think I should put you on the spot more often. That was thank you for being honest, and I think that's exactly it. I think patience is often a byproduct of, like you're saying, beating yourself up or feeling quite low or remembering that pace. And actually, grace is not one of these fluffy things. It's an incredibly real, incredibly real and tangible thing to experience. And it can impact your lives, like you've just described. Grace impacting your life in quite a tangible way, not like a sort of high in the clouds idea or concept. But no, it's great to hear how grace is physically impacting you in the way that you work things out, which is great. And for you, Katie, I think hearing your just that simplicity about trusting God having such a direct and significant impact in your day to day. I wonder if you might be able to expand on sort of what you did to trust in God, because I found in my life that sometimes I've trusted God or I've thought I've trusted him, but I've just I've thought about trusting him rather than actually trusted him. So for you, what did it look like practically to trust him?
I think not hide away from the anxiety. So actually, talk about it. So again, house group really helped with this in terms of they would pray for me. They were praying kind of probably right up the month before I was going back. I started to obviously get these feelings. So I had to kind of talk to work and things like that. And I am a planner. I like to know what's happening.
Yeah.
And I get incredibly anxious if I don't know what's happening. So having that prayer and knowing that I had that prayer was really helpful for me. And just getting into it. I am also a doer. I like to do things. I need to do things. And doing work and going to work. And knowing that I didn't have to be afraid because I knew that God was there. In a way, it's hard to describe. I get gut feelings, and I get a feeling and a sense of God. And on my first day, I had that sense of God when I was in the car. I was waiting to go in a few minutes early, and I just felt a calm. And it was just allowing myself to feel that, and that's really hard sometimes.
Yeah.
But I find being in a quiet space or having some music on, not necessarily whale music or anything like that, but like even a Christian song or a non-Christian song sometimes it can really help to calm you down and to allow that headspace to allow him in and to allow myself to have time as well. I find is really helpful, and to if I can feel that presence, then I know that I can trust. It's almost like that fall thing that you do. If you know that somebody's behind you and then they catch you, you know that person's there and you know that person's going to catch you. And it's the same for God. I know that God's going to catch me as long as I let go.
Yeah.
And put my trust in him in that way.
Yeah, definitely.
But talking to other mums as well, or people who've been in similar situations in terms of going back to work after a long period of time off, that really helps as well. To know that you're not the only one who's gone through it, because it can feel very insular. In that moment, you can feel like you're the only one, but actually, loads of people have done it before. Loads of people have gone off on maternity leave or gone back to work after a long period of time, and having those conversations and those honest conversations was really helpful as well.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. And I mean, that's in some ways what this podcast intends to do, is not only for people in the church to get to know people a bit deeper and a bit more, get to know what they do and what's been going on in their lives, but also for people to find relatable stories, or where God's intervened and where God's turned around situations for them, whether that be in subtle ways or really dramatic ways. It doesn't matter, but it's wonderful to hear you guys share your stories from real world examples and real world experiences. And if you're at all in any position that Dan and Katie have been in, or some of the things that they've shared, and you're listening to this, then I'd like to encourage you to continue to trust in God, to know that, like Katie said, just to trust in him and know that when you step out, when you make a step in faith, he's going to be there to catch you. And in the same way for Dan, if you're in a situation where you're trying to figure out your relationship with God and you're impatient, or perhaps you're just struggling at the moment, know that God's grace is more than sufficient for the situation you're going through. It's more than sufficient to cover any wrongdoings or things you feel ill about yourself or anything like that. So guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for reminding us about those really important messages of grace and trusting God. And I just wonder, just to close then, would one of you or both of you just be able to lift up in prayer some of those things that you've prayed for, and pray for some of the people listening?
Yeah, I've been nominated. Yeah, that's fine. Shall we pray?
Yeah.
Yeah, Father, we just thank you for your grace. We thank you that it's enough for us. We don't have to add anything to it. We're not required to add anything to it, and that we can live in that now. That we can know that, and we know that you've made us worthy, not because of anything we've done, but because of something Jesus has done, and that that can free us, and does free us into being able to choose that way that you want us to live. And we just thank you for that, and thank you for how that has been really sustaining for me over the last few weeks particularly. And if I would lift up anyone who is feeling unworthy, is feeling like they don't know if they can trust you, and we just ask that you would give them the faith to trust in you and to trust in your grace. That they don't need to be strong and carry everything themselves, because actually you're the one who walks alongside us. You're the one who carries us when we need it. We just ask that anyone listening would just and feels any of these things that we talked about, whether they feel low, whether they feel anxious, whether there's something big coming up, or that you would some way just remind them that you're there and that you care about all of these little things, even the small mundane things to us, that you care about these things. And we just thank you for that. And we thank you for how we're able to be community in FCC. And we just want to pray that would continue to grow and be blessed, so that fair and will know you. Just thank you for that, Lord.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for listening. I want to say a very special thank you for Dan and Katie for joining me today and joining in this conversation. So thank you, guys. And I want to also encourage you that if anything in this podcast has triggered some thinking for you, some challenge for you, or you just want to talk more about it, then please feel free that you can get in touch with us through our social media, or through email or phone, or however you want to get in touch. Please get in touch. We'd love to be able to talk with you further. But thank you so much for listening. We have another podcast coming up next week, so stay tuned for that. But until further notice, we'll see you very, very soon. This podcast is all about us learning and growing together. And so if you would like to come and join me for a conversation, then please get in touch. We'd love to hear what God is doing in your life. However you were listening and wherever you were listening, thanks so much for joining in. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then come and join us next week for a similar conversation, but with someone different.